Hello and welcome to Upon Further Review, Episode 8, Week 7 preview of the Summit Athletic Conference alongside Eric Dukevich. I'm the coach Shannon Griffith, and welcome to tonight's episode. We're going to have Sherwood Haydock joining us a little bit later to talk a little bit about the Wayne Generals. And of course, we will have another conversation with the voice of Northeast Indiana high school sports, Brett Rump, with a call to the booth. But this past week on Friday night, we were up in Kendallville, Indiana to take in all the festivities of homecoming, as well as watch the Norwell Knights move to 6-0 on the season with a resounding defeat of the East Noble Knights. Eric, and I don't know if you could say anything bad about that game, but it was surely dominated from start to finish by the Norwell Knights.
Yes, nothing to say bad about Norwell. It was just a complete start to finish, all phases of the game, the running game, the passing game, the defensive side of the ball, even special teams with some big plays to help Norwell to that big shutout again. And it was a fun atmosphere up at East Noble. I mean, to the credit of the East Noble fans, they stayed through the game. I mean, it very easily, once it hit the running clock in the beginning of the third quarter, people could have started filing out for the evening. But by and large, they stayed till the end, enjoyed the homecoming festivities, and we certainly enjoyed our time up there. But Norwell, I mean, we talked about it a lot all last week, just their ability to just shut down offenses, everybody that they've been able to play. They did it once again with East Noble last Friday, and a dominant win for them. And obviously, they now move into the clear favorites in the NE8. But there are some other teams that lurking in the wings for Norwell still. But very impressed by what I saw from the Norwell Knights last Friday night.
Yeah, the ball game was led by kind of an unfamiliar name that you would suppose to see because he just really runs the show, but he had a phenomenal game. Leighton Bailey, 6 of 9, 133 yards, a touchdown that he hit Cade Shelton on about a 62-yard while getting hit in the chest, and was able to throw probably one of the best balls I've seen thrown by a quarterback this year in terms of getting enough air underneath it, but anticipating the break of Cade Shelton on the post route, and he hit him in stride. And the Shelton kid was, I mean, once he caught it, he opened up on the Norwell or the East Noble defenders. But another name that popped into the scores book was Drew Graff, the sophomore. 9 carries, 109 yards, and on one play, we saw his speed.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another thing for Norwell is part of the development of this team is and especially when you get up big, and it's not just for Norwell, it's for a lot of these teams that have deep rosters, and Norwell is one of those schools with being a 3A school. It's not like they're they don't have 100 guys on the team by any means, but probably in the 60s, I would have to say. But to get different guys out there to continue to develop, because you never know when you're going to rely on somebody and need somebody into the postseason as things go for Norwell. I mean, for them, it is that system of development that they've been able to help turn the corner with the Graffs there and Leighton Bailey at quarterback. And so it's great to see different people get involved in those games for them, because you never know when those scenarios are going to pop up, at a regional game or maybe a semi-state down the line where, all those guys across the board have to be ready for at a moment's notice. And I think they were clicking on all cylinders. That always helps. And I think that is where for Norwell, just continuing to grind it out and just really just be able to stop the other offense, and then be able to cash that in and points off turnovers. That's a big factor for them as well.
No question, no question. Well, let's bring in our friend, the guru, as we like to call him, Mr. Brett Rump from 1380 The Fan, the gentleman that gets to call all the games and we get the pleasure of working with. I even got on the Sports Rush a little bit this past week. I felt pretty special. I mean, but I was taking some hits between him and Rakestraw about my eating abilities on Friday nights. But Brett, how you doing?
Doing well, Shannon.
Well, I guess you could say, just to pick up on what Eric and I was discussing, Norwell's dominant performance Friday night. Not that we would say that it was unanticipated, but we weren't quite sure. Just them going up into a hostile environment like East Noble and playing against a team that was really outmatched, and most of it's because Norwell was playing a lot of juniors and seniors, and East Noble had a lot of sophomores in the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, you could physically see the difference, but for Norwell, they've got such a business-like approach. I mean, you could tell just the way they came out for pregame warm-ups. They're very focused. I don't want to say it's not a rah-rah group, but I think they know the mission at hand. They accept the challenge. And I do want to throw this in real quick, too, because one observation before we get too far into the show. Shannon, I know you coach college football, and I know the trend has become not practicing a lot of physicality during the week in college football, NFL football. You don't see a lot of tackling. And I think the result, if we watch football on Saturdays and even on Sundays, you don't see a lot of really good tackling. And they just don't practice it. They stay away from that contact because they don't want two of their players beating up on each other. But I will say this, that was one of the most beautiful form tackles to preserve that shutout on that little out route that was caught by East Noble inside the 1 yard line. All the guy's got to do is be able to turn his shoulders, and he's got the football over the plane. And the Norwell defender came up, got the helmet in front to keep him from turning the shoulders and put him down to preserve that shutout. And to me, plenty of great plays to talk about, but ultimately I know how important that is to Norwell defensively, and they pride themselves on their defense. To me, that might have been the play of the night to keep East Noble off the board. It's the 4th shutout in 6 games so far for Norwell, but it wasn't just that, East Noble didn't have a chance to score. East Noble should have scored, and probably 90% of the time or greater, they would have scored on that completion. But What a great tackle by Norwell to keep that shutout preserved. And in a 45-0 game, obviously there's so many different plays we could talk about, but that was one of them I thought that really stood out.
Yeah, I guess if you had to compare Norwell to kind of what we have seen in the Summit Athletic Conference week in, week out, how close would you compare them to, say, maybe a Carroll in some respects because of their defense?
They would, in my mind, because of the duality of that Carroll offense where they can throw it and run it, and because of the size up front by Carroll and that defensive front for the Carroll Chargers, I think that would be a team that would give them trouble. But if anybody sits here and wants to think that the NE8 falls in line after you go through the 10 teams in the SAC, forget about it, because that Norwell team, they would battle Snyder, they would battle Homestead, they would battle Dwenger. That team is very complete. They run the football. They've got solid players up at the line of scrimmage. Brody Bolin might be the best football player we barely talk about because he's not a skill player. But this kid on both sides of the football plays almost every snap and dominates defensively at the line of scrimmage, and he faces double teams almost every snap. But offensively, they run behind him. Luke Graft, a big body, strong, solid guy. Luke Graft reminds me in some ways, and I'm not trying to make a comparison, but in some ways, just physically and the way he runs, he reminds me of what we saw last year in Laban Davis. And I'll bet as soon as I said he reminds me of, you probably were thinking the same name I was thinking, because, he's a big physical body that's tough to bring down. As the game wears on, he wears on you. And, he gets more effective as the game progresses. And I just think, they're a complete team. The big question mark about Norwell is the passing game and whether or not they're going to be able to throw it if you run into somebody in the postseason that just stacks the box, decides this game's becoming one-dimensional, especially in November, which I think Norwell expects to play well into November. And those nights where it can be very difficult to throw the football. If I was Josh Gerber, and I want to get your take on this, Shannon, being a former coach, I would want to work on that aspect of my game a little bit. I would probably, like in the next couple of weeks, when you're playing teams like DeKalb and Huntington North, Norwell should win those games. If I'm Josh Gerber, I'm trying to run some play action passes. I'm not going to give away the whole playbook, but I want to see what happens if our team comes out and has to throw the football. Because both those teams are going to play like East Noble did. They're going to load the box. They're going to try to take away the run. What they have 8 guys within like 3 yards of the line of scrimmage Friday night. And so I want to see Norwell kind of work on that aspect, just so they've got game reps of throwing the football, because I do think they can do it if necessary. But I think what they've got to do is start thinking, okay, let's pretend it's necessary and see what happens.
Yeah, I would say the one thing that I noticed quite a bit is Leighton Bailey. He's not comfortable in the pocket. I mean, he's bailing pretty quickly in the pocket. So he's not a guy that's, going to be a prolific drop back passer. But I think they've got to, like you said, play action pass, maybe some bootlegs. But just like what Jared Souter did a year ago when we were up there and they got behind, they had to abandon what they did and they went 4 wides and they started throwing it all over the place. And we really didn't think they were going to amount to much. But, you've got to I'm sure Coach Gerber's got some things that he hasn't maybe put his cards on the table, so to speak, at this point. But definitely a very sound football team in a lot of areas that you really can't overly look at one or two of their football team and say, man, they're really weak here, they're really weak there, because they're going to be in games because of defense. I mean, that's the thing. And they do a great job of complementary football. And what I mean by that is they're able to gain field position pretty regularly throughout the game, especially with that defense doing what they're capable of doing in special teams. But, looking at that conference right now, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of this, and you chime in here too as well. The win that Columbia City had Friday night against New Haven, where they won 49-7. I think in some respects I wouldn't have expected that type of lopsided score. Columbia City just kind of, they let it all hang out, so to speak, because they onside kicked, I think, 3 times and got the recovery on those onside kicks. But Colton Pepper was only 5 of 12. The running back, Gorey, he had 154 yards, but they just really dominated that ball game.
Yeah, and one thing when you're kicking off to a team that has the potential big play threat waiting back there to return it, you've got to either kick it over his head and out of the end zone, or you've got to squib it somehow. And I didn't see the actual onside kicks to know if they were attempting to squib it and somebody got in the way or it bounced around. But the point is, when you don't want to have it in the hands of Mylan Graham with open field to work with. He's just too much of a threat. And I think Columbia City trusts that defense, that even if they give up some field position because of that, and then it ended up they kept recovering them. But you've got to give a lot of credit to what Columbia City is doing, because we did not have them picked to do what they're doing. And it's not just win games, because they usually win The first 5 weeks, they usually have a pretty good record, and we aren't surprised by that. It's the domination, the way their defense is just shutting people down, and now their offense seems to be clicking. And you mentioned Colton Piper, and yeah, he hasn't put up the gaudy stats, but he provides at least a threat that keeps that offense balanced. And then from the running position, rushing the football, Columbia City's got 3 different guys that can rotate in there, so they're always fresh. They've always got guys, that aren't getting the 30 carries a game, that usually, are on that 15, 16 carries a game max type of rotation. And it's impressive statistically. It's impressive what they've done scoring wise, but we're kind of keeping our eye on week 9, because if things kind of continue to progress down these paths, that Columbia City at Norwell game to finish the regular season could be for all the marbles in the NE8.
Yeah. And I mean, the defense, we talked about for both Norwell and Columbia City. I mean, two of the, not only the top 2 in the NE8 by far, but the the state. And I think that's something we aren't really familiar with Columbia City. It'd be really interesting to see down the road when week 9 comes, like, where does that defense of Columbia City match up against the offense of Norwell and what they're able to do. And just trying to get some turnovers in that regard, because that Norwell protects the ball, Columbia City is getting after it, forcing fumbles, getting interceptions and things like that. So that's going to be a key matchup down the line, because it's one of those things where Columbia City throws the ball around a lot. So much more, than a lot of schools. So, and has been successful with that. So that'll be very interesting to see, because Norwell is stopping the run so well, finding a team that is winning big with the passing game. It should be a key matchup in the weeks to come.
And I think one thing to watch with Columbia City is they've got to find a number 2 receiver. Statistically, you look at the Fuller kid, Stratton Fuller, 26 receptions on the year. The next closest kid on the roster has 7 receptions. So clearly they've got a favorite 1A target.
Yeah.
But, as you move into postseason, there's no surprises, because the stats are out there, the video's out there. And if you've got a guy that you go to that often, that they're going to be rotating over, they're going to bring the second man in coverage, and you've got to find maybe a matchup that's favorable among the other receivers. And so I think that's something that Columbia City will maybe try to find between now and when you get into the postseason, or maybe even when you take on Norwell in that final game. And remember, the NE8, they don't have tiebreakers. So you get to that final game, Columbia City could even suffer a loss and still have a chance to claim a conference championship if they can get the head-to-head win. So, there's still a lot at stake here in the NE8. And if you look at the schedule, obviously Columbia City has the more difficult of it. They've got an East Noble team that's going to look to rebound. They've got them this week. The next week they take on Leo. Well, that game could be perhaps Leo's opportunity to try to maybe get into the mix for a conference championship. Because if you look at Leo with just 1 loss, and theoretically, when you look at the schedule that remains, Leo knocks off Columbia City and Columbia City knocks off Norwell, 3 teams with 1 loss. And you could have a 3-way tie for the championship. So, Leo's right there in the mix as well. And so that's going to be a challenge for Columbia City the week before they have that Norwell game. It's really a tough schedule, challenging for Columbia City the rest of the way. But boy, did they pass the test Friday night with that big win over New Haven.
Hey, Brumpy, why don't you stay a little bit? Coach Dude's going to put you back into the green room, because I do want to come back and do a little conversation on the ACAC and the SAC. But we've got Coach Haydock ready to come on, and I want to let him come on and get through us so he can get back to his game planning week. So let's go ahead and bring on Coach Haydock. Coach Haydock, how you doing? I can't hear you there, Coach. Can you hear us? Make sure your mic's not. turned off.
Oh, what about now?
There you go. I can hear you now.
Hey,
We're going to do
I'm still watching VH videos of games. So, you know.
You got those betas out there trying
a.
to.
Well, Coach, I appreciate you coming on, and I know it was a tough week, but I guess the one question I have for you, how do you feel overall where you're at in terms of the program development? Because nothing in the world of football is called a quick fix. So how do you kind of feel now that you kind of got a little bit of the foundation laid, but you're adding to that?
Well, I think we're getting better every year. And when I took the job, I knew it's going to be very difficult to compete in the SAC because I was in the SAC for 11 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we had some great Harding teams, but we only won the SAC one time. And before this season started, I felt like there was five of teams in the SAC that were probably better than anybody in our sectional. And I knew they would be tough to beat, and that has been proven true. We still got 3 games left, and we're still facing great opponents. I mean, haven't played Carroll yet. So I look at it as we're improving at the lower levels. We're improving each week. We just can't judge ourselves. And this is the thing I try to stress to our players.
Correct.
You can't judge yourself off, like, for example, Snyder. I mean, you take away 2 kickoff returns, and I know that's part of the game, but that's a rarity. We don't usually allow those. And, we should have kicked to the same kid. And, our kicker just, I don't think understands what I'm trying to explain. Well, he's a soccer player, and he's a great kicker, and he thinks he should be able to kick it deep every time because he kicks it inside the 5 or in the end zone, and it still got to their number 3, even when we kicked it on the ground. But, they got 14 points off that, and then we haven't had pick 6 for a while, and we threw a pick 6 on a terrible decision by our quarterback. So we gave them 21 points. Now, granted, we wouldn't have beat them no matter what. They would probably picked up another 10 or 14 points anyway, but we might have picked up something. It's when you've been beat down a lot and it starts happening in the game, it's really difficult for this age group to understand what we're trying to tell them, that we can do this, we can do that, and whatever. So we're improving, and we already, this time last year we didn't have 2 wins. So we have 2 wins. We think we can win another, and we think definitely we can compete in the sectional.
Sure. Coach, of course, the headlines for Wayne High School football becomes Lamarian Nelson. I mean, just overall, talk about his impact on the program, particularly this season already. 427 yards and 6 touchdowns 2 weeks ago against Southside. 7 touchdowns, excuse me.
We have to take our glory when we have it.
Yeah. Talk about, I mean, what he has meant to the program, and as far as him coming in, being part of the system. We talk about, the running backs that you're able to develop over time, just his impact on what you're trying to do at Wayne High School.
Well, when I came in, he was a sophomore, and a couple of coaches said, we think we got a freshman that I've three guys on my coaching staff coached with me earlier at Harding, and they go, we think we got a back that's a freshman. It's going to be a sophomore that kind of fits your type of back. And sure enough, he was. And the sophomore year, he got over 300, came on late in the year and did well. But we had a kid named Chris Thomas, and then he was well over 1,000. And then Sean Collins was the flex type player. But what he's done, Lamarian's done, is developed himself every year and realized I like the big back that can run. But he's totally natural. And what I mean by that is we haven't taught him anything. When he makes cuts and does that right there, a straight arm and takes off, and we haven't taught him that. We just work his tail end off in practice. I hate to say how many tires he's flipped and how many things he's pulled, but I tell our running backs that to be our one back, you have to break a lot of tackles and actually carry the ball a lot and not fumble. and he does a good job with that.
Sure. Talk about too, like, what for him to come in and what he's been able to do. The reaction to the other kids as far as working harder and things like that. Just how does he pull this program along and trying to get this Wayne team where you'd like to be ultimately as time goes on?
Well, first of all, the kids don't think he works harder. So I always have to explain to them at any time, because I'll have him doing something else and they'll look down and the running back coach will have his helmet off and all that stuff. But I go, anybody wants to trade places with him, you can do all that, because when a back's a senior and has played for me and has carried the ball, he does not get the ball a lot of times in practice. He's already had all those repetitions in the sophomore and junior year, so I don't want to beat him up more in practice, because we're pretty physical in practice, and we go full gear, the full amount you can do, and we hit a lot. And not as much as I'd like, because the state changed their rules. But so the first thing is they don't think that, and then they realize that, maybe I wouldn't want to be doing that and things like that. It's always receivers that complain, always Madonnas are like, I go, well, he can go over and catch passes, and you can go flip tires and see what happens. But what he means to us is, well, he's a good kid, first of all, and he's very quiet. If you don't ask him a question, you won't hear his voice. Very quiet. And that's good. So when he's getting all this press right now, and he's not the kind that's bragging about it and talking it up. And that's a big thing in Fort Wayne. Kids talk things up a lot. They yappity yap a lot. And in the SAC, it's really bad on each other. Not mean, just like, I'm better than you, you're trash and all that. And he does not do anything like that. He just gets the ball and runs. And the only problem he's ever gave me is he was beat up at the end of Northside game, and I still had him in because I thought we could get another score, and he really wanted out of the game. And I didn't like that, and he didn't like the point I kept him in. So, I'm trying to teach these guys that no matter what score is, you still play the game. It's a 48-minute game. You only got 9 of them. You're a senior. Don't even want to come out ever. And I think, unfortunately, we're still at this stage where it still might be a club or something like that for these kids. Not everything I say. The biggest difference is when I came back to Wayne and was gone 9 years of Woodland, and then everybody says, "Well, now you're back in the SAC," and Wayne has to be like Harding. And I go, "It's not even close. It's not the same." And they go, "How?" I go, "Well, first of all, anything I said at any school I've been at, if I said something, it was gospel. And here it seems like I have to explain too much, and that gets tiring. I just finally say you have to do it. It's like when your parents go, because I said so. So I'm like their parents now because I said so. And, they don't have a great sense of history. I try to tell them, I've been to state 3 times, and I've taken trash and made it treasure. And this can happen here too. And they want it, but I don't think they necessarily realize all the things they have to do to get it.
Well, Coach, I know that you got Concordia coming up, and we want to wish you the best of luck going forward this year. And, we keep an eye on the Generals. Of course, one of the reasons is that Generals have a little bit of a piece of my heart because my father coached there for a number of years back in the 70s and 80s and such. So best of luck the rest of the year. You got a phenomenal kid in Nelson. He's, a tremendous athlete and running back. And, I know you're gearing up not only for the latter part of the year here, but also for the tournament. So good luck to you.
Yeah. One thing we've always told our kids is you have to always look towards the playoffs, because our conference is way too strong. And I know a lot of people can say that, but we're talking about, Snyder's a top 5A, and Carroll's a top 5, 6A, that kind of thing. So we think that all those schools that I talked about could come down to 4A and do big damage. I don't think anybody from the whole northern part of the state could beat Snyder in 4A. So it makes us realize, hey, we're going to be playing good competition, but it's not quite the same.
Correct.
So we're gearing ourselves up, and hopefully we can make a run of it and, play well in the sectionals.
Well, good luck, Coach. We appreciate you jumping on here, and I'm sure you got plenty of work to do with not only schoolwork and on top of that, but game planning for the cadets. So good luck.
All right. Thank you very much.
That was Sherwood Haydock, head football coach of the Wayne Generals, that joined us here. And we'll now bring in our astute colleague, Mr. Brett Rump, to continue our conversation here for a little bit longer. I wanted to jump to the the ACAC conference, and let's talk a little bit about Adams Central and their game against South Adams, which was at South Adams. And, this was a game that, throw out the stats and everything, but 29-point victory, 49-20 over the South Adams Starfires. Not too many things are changing in the ACAC right now.
Well, and it's been a dominant year for Adams Central. And, I thought they would be a good team. I mean, they've built a program there where consistently they're always a contender in that conference. But did we see, the guys getting replaced, the Blake Hireleys, the Alex Currys, the kids that we saw on the stats and highlights every week a year ago, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, they carried them to a state championship. Most 1A programs can't replace that kind of talent. And yet here they are right back again where they really were a year ago. Statistically, you compare this team with last year's team, not a lot of difference. Now, I'm sure Coach Mosier's going to point out things that are different, and he's probably going to point out things where this year's team is deficient compared to last year's team, because that's what coaches do, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they got to keep their kids working for a higher bar. And if they say, hey, look, last year's team went to the state championship because they did this better than you do this, because kids can get caught up in the type of one-sided victories they consistently are having at Adams Central. And that doesn't happen in Monroe. I mean, they keep going about their business. They keep winning games easily. They're a really difficult team to stop. If you're, facing them defensively, their offense is just a very tricky, difficult offense with, and they run it with almost near flawless execution.
Right.
The way they run those handoffs to running to wing backs and get the guard to pull and all this other misdirection they run. They do it so effectively that I think it's hard to defend. But the thing about Adams Central is how well they play defensively.
Right.
They take so much away, and South Adams was able to find a couple things in the film that I think they could exploit. But then I think Adams Central adjusted to it, eventually pulled away, and another one-sided win for the Flying Jets.
Yeah, Owen Warner was 23 of 37 for 218 yards and 3 touchdowns, but they gave up 21 in the first and 14 in the second defensively, South Adams did. And, Ryan Tester was their leading rusher, 8 carries, 174 yards. So they're doing the same things that they've always done and doing it quite well. The other thing
was one thing, Shannon, that South Adams may have exposed a little bit,
right,
is if you're going to beat that defense, I think you're going to have to put it in the air. But the question is, how many 1A quarterbacks really sling it? I mean, you see it sometimes 5A, 6A, but you don't see a lot of 1A quarterbacks. I mean, what we're seeing right now is kind of typical of 1A football. Teams that, develop their offense around the run. It's easier to find running backs, I think, in a small school than find guys that can go and catch it. And so you build a team that runs first, throws second. But with Ryan Black, I think they've got a kid almost like Norwell with Leighton Bailey. I think they've got a kid that they believe in that he can throw the football if they need to. But defensively, I wonder how many times they see reps defensively of the other quarterback on the scout team just flinging it all over the field like Owen Warner can. And so, it probably didn't hurt them to at least see it, adjust to it, and they eventually took it away. But, it's one of those things where I think they realize what kind of football team they need to have success, not only in the conference, but through the postseason. And I think they're exactly that football team. That's why when you look at 1A, it's going to be very tough for anybody in the 1A path to derail Adams Central from getting all the way back to where they were last year to end the season. And that's Lucas Oil Stadium on Thanksgiving weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and part of that, you touched on a little bit, the running game, 485 total yards of offense for Adams Central last Friday against South Adams. Only 25 passing yards. And so, you do that math right there, 460 rushing yards, but they were mixing it up too. Like, they have Keegan Bloom, who's probably considered the overall leading rusher. But yeah, Ryan Tester, Gavin Cook, Ryan Black, who's the quarterback's kind of a dual threat kind of situation. So there again, a lot of weapons, and they're basically saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to run it down your throat. Stop us. And that's going to be the challenge for, the remaining ACAC game opponents for Adams Central, as well as their path through the sectionals and playoffs. So they're telling you, here you go, because Ryan Black only threw two for 4 for 25 yards and a touchdown. He did get a touchdown out of one of those. So that, they are stacked in the backfield and have a lot of weapons when you can find, 5 touchdowns by 3 different people and a 4th person getting some good yardage as well.
Can you imagine just how well you've got to execute your offense? And I'm talking about the offensive linemen all the way through the backfield. When your opponent knows exactly what you're running, I mean, you're going to hand off the football to somebody. It's either going to be that wing back fake sweep or the handoff on the dive to the fullback. But they know what you're going to do. I mean, corners are basically looking in the backfield, figuring out if they need to come up and run support. They're not paying attention to a wide receiver. Do you know how well you have to execute that offense to put 400 and some yards up against a good defensive team in South Adams? When South Adams knows the whole game plan is take away the run. I mean, they're a machine. I mean, it's so impressive. And it continues to bring up the question I've asked the last couple of weeks, who's the most dominant, Norwell or Adams Central? Because in many ways, I think they mirror each other. They both have a very established running game. They do it maybe a little different way, but you go in as a defensive coach and the game plan has to be at least contain the run. And I don't know if any coach goes in, Shannon, I don't know if you go in and think we're going to take the run away, because the team that does it so well, you probably can't take it away, but you've got to force them into some uncomfortable situations down and distance.
Right.
And that's your best chance.
Yeah, that's the thing with those type of teams is, number one, they're hard to prepare for because it's really hard to do it in a 2 to 3 day window with everything that they do. And then on top of that, trying to make them uncomfortable by either A, getting up by at least 2 scores on them, or forcing them into the 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 10s, 3rd and 12s, and not giving them much on those plays, because he'll go for it on 4th down if he feels he's within that, striking distance. So yeah, they've done a great job. And I honestly, when I talked to him at media days, I think he felt like he had some good kids coming back, but I think he also was worried a little bit about his offensive line because they were going to be young. So I think he's got the right kids in the right spots to provide the leadership and the direction, and they've brought the youngins along the way. But at Adams Central, that's what's expected now. It's a reload mentality, not rebuild. So they've done a great job with that. Let's jump over to the Summit Athletic Conference as we head back to our stomping ground, so to speak. How about, what a win for Northside. That was a huge win for them. I think, Eric, you had said something kind of to the effect of kind of like a program win, because I think it was what they were 0-7 against
Yeah,
Homestead.
that's their first ever win against Homestead. And,
yeah, it was, but and I think they did it by a little bit of a gamble because they went for two there late, but they had 500 and I think they had close to 544 yards, if I'm not mistaken, because they had 365 of that was on the ground, I think. So thoughts on that win, Rumpy?
Well, you're right. Huge win for Northside. And, unfortunately, Northside couldn't hang in the contenders category too long because they picked up those 2 losses out of their first 3 games. But the what ifs that they've got to be thinking about at Northside with that first game against Snyder, the what if on the 2-point conversions that night, if they could have gotten that win over Snyder. And, all they'd have is a blemish, a close loss to a Carroll squad that, is 6A program, really good team. I think the playoffs are going to be very interesting because you talk to Sherwood Haydock, and I think you look at 4A, and I think Wayne's got a real shot to win that sectional. And then you look at Northside, and you think, okay, in 5A, guess what? They might get their rematch against Snyder. And so they probably would love to have another shot at the Panthers. But the win on, again, I've been saying this, that I think the real key to Northside and what is the straw that is stirring their drink is John Tay Lambert.
Yes.
He sets up the entire structure of their offense as far as play action and keeping defenses honest so you can't focus too much of your attention on Tay Johnson.
Right.
Because, you've got to take away Lambert first. That kid, he is one tough running back. And, you look between Nelson at Wayne and Lambert at Northside, and I don't know, I guess is there 2 running backs in the all SAC? Because if there's not, there needs to be this year, because both those kids have earned it without question. And, and then you look at Snyder and then, Langston Level and what he's done, but he's kind of shared the load a little bit at Snyder. But let me tell you, Lambert and Nelson, they are very talented kids. And I don't know where, their future destination will lead them, but they're going to make a name for themselves in college with the way they run the football, both breakaway speed, outside speed, but not afraid to run between the tackles. And, I think for Northside that sets up the Bodie Dickerson passing game by having a running back that is that talented.
Yeah, he had 277 yards against Homestead on 28 carries, and you hit it on the head with Bo Dickerson. I think when they have a run game, that makes Dickerson that much better as a player, because I think it settles the kid down and he doesn't all of a sudden think that he's going to have to, go slinging a lot. He was 17 of 24, 179 and 3 touchdown passes.
Well,
probably one of his best games.
On that pass rush, that play action, you basically suck the lineman into Lambert, and it gives Dickerson that extra 1 or 2 count to set in the pocket and see what the defense is doing, how they're reacting. It's, to me, that does make him much more comfortable. I think he's more comfortable in the pocket than rolling out, although they will roll him out. But to me, that the job that Lambert has done, deserves the headlines, I think. As talented as Johnson is, Johnson's success somewhat is kind of the piggyback of what Lambert does. Right. And we've seen that. And I watched the end of that game, Shannon, on Friday night, and it was like a tennis match. It was up and down the field. And so if there's going to be a question mark with Northside, it's going to be, can they get defensive stops when they need them in the postseason? And that's going to be the challenge because of the way Snyder's offense is clicking right now. But credit to them for converting the 2-point conversion. That was a tough play. They executed it, and huge win for Ben Johnson and the Northside Legends.
Yeah. And Snyder continues to keep rolling. They had that blemish against Carroll, but they continue to put it on. Held them Marion Nelson to just 97 yards over last Friday night. So they're coming along, and their defense is starting to show really what they can make it. I know Snyder heading into last week, it was leading the SAC in total scoring for a team, but now you're seeing the defense come alive too. And all of a sudden, Snyder is entering that conversation where, they still have a chance at an SAC title, but, a big threat in that sectional round, especially if we have a matchup with Dwanger and Snyder or a Northside Snyder Dwang matchup again. The Panthers playing really well.
I think Coach Haydock kind of hit on this, that Snyder has plenty of playmakers. I mean, with Mari Juarez and with Level in the backfield, Buchanan had the big game a couple of weeks ago. They've got playmakers, and they've just got to find ways to get them the ball in space. And a lot of it comes down for me with Snyder is their offensive line. I think it's a good line. I don't know if they've hit the elite level yet, but I think they will get there. We know how well they're coached at Snyder at the line of scrimmage and that offensive line. But if they protect and they block, they've got guys that are going to make plays. Level's going to run on you. Buchanan's going to run on you. You're going to have time for Hopper to throw the ball. He's got multiple weapons he can throw it to, deep weapons, big weapons over the middle, and that's a pretty complete football team. And I know Coach Tippmann actually a week ago seemed to be pretty pleased with where the team was at. And you don't get that a lot from a coach where he admits that he's happy with where the progress has gotten them. But he said, we're kind of clicking right now. And, they're able to do it in the air. They're able to do it on the ground. And he likes their defense because it's led by linebackers that are very fast and run all over the place. They're not, as he said, they're not the biggest kids like they've had in the past with guys like Lawrence Johnson and, those big guys up front. But they are a fast defense that has great pursuit. And I think sometimes in high school football, that's almost better.
Well, Rumpy, we appreciate your expertise as we went through a dynamic look at all the conferences as we're all the way past the halfway point. They'll be doing the sectional draw here in about 2 weeks on October the 9th. So we appreciate you coming on, and we'll see you Friday.
Well, I know math is not your strongest point, Shannon, so I'll just tell you it's 2/3 of the way through the season.
Well, okay.
It's out of 9.
Okay.
You were struggling between a little over halfway, it's 2/3 of the way. But we've got a big one coming up this week. Rivalry week, baby. Rivalry week.
Yeah, it's rivalry week. That's for sure. We'll have the Carroll Chargers at the Homestead Spartans, a big rivalry game, another one that you could probably throw out the statistics on. We'll have the pregame at 6 p.m. with Eric and Jim Shevlin and myself, and then the kickoff at 7 p.m. And then, of course, the Indiana Physical Therapy postgame show at the Pizza Hut at Coventry, all on 1380 The Fan, 100.9 FM. And don't forget, you can catch Mr. Rump weekdays from 4 to 6 on the Sports Rush, also on 1380 The Fan, 100.9 FM. Rumpy, thanks for joining us.
I appreciate it, guys. Have a great week.
All right, buddy.
All right.
Brett Rump, our fearless Northeast Indiana voice of high school athletics.
Well, I have to say, Shannon, with that game, we were up at East Noble, and it was a 24-0 at halftime. So very impressed with Rumpy being able to keep track of some of the other scores, because I think things kind of got out of hand last Friday night up at Kendallville, so we could kind of keep our eyes. But it was an important night. I mean, that South Adams game was huge for the standings, the community, and obviously Adams Central, put on a great performance too. But, all of those games, Leo battling Belmont. That was another one that
Yeah.
early on it was close, and then
Yeah.
Leo was able to pull away. So that's the fun part about Friday nights, is that especially as you get this late into the season, start getting in, halfway, 2/3 the way through the season, you start looking at, okay, what are other teams doing? Because it has
Right.
so many implications on, I mean, that Northside Homestead game, a game easily probably the best game of the week, obviously,
Yeah.
but we could have been there. We could have been at some of the other NE8 games. Columbia City and New Haven was another one that a lot of people had a lot of intrigue on. So you start watching other scores around the area while you're on the air, and
Right.
kudos to Brett and to you and everybody else, that we're able to keep up on it. And because there's a lot of great football going on every Friday night around Northeast Indiana.
Well, we always say there's 7 hours of coverage, and really the only entity that does that is 1380 The Fan 100.9 FM. And thanks to them and their management for allowing that much coverage on a Friday night. And I know Rump works very diligently throughout the year to make that happen, and, advertising and those things that allow us to do that. So, but, we got to look ahead here to our week 7 in the Summit Athletic Conference. We've got the rivalry week, the battles of the bishops. That's going to be a pretty darn good ball game. Northrop Snyder, Southside at Northside for the totem pole. Bishop Dwenger at Bishop Lures, which I just said. And but let's come back to the Carroll at Homestead game, dude, and look at that one game here as we get to finish up this episode 8 before we jump to the players of the week, the player of the week. But Carroll, another game for Homestead. Could they lose 3 in a row? I mean, it doesn't seem possible to say 3 in a row as a loss for the Homestead Spartans.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one. I mean, and this is the kind of the SAC schedule, especially a team like, we talk about Northside's big win over Homestead. Each and every week you're going to have these teams coming after you, getting your best. I mean, Southside has struggled, but by golly, I'm sure when they were playing Carroll over the weekend, they were, last week, top team in the SAC versus, the last team in the SAC. Southside's trying to come out and play their best game because they realize what they have lined up against ahead of them. But that's for Homestead. It's going to be tough. Now they host them. They host Carroll, so it's at Homestead. Peyton Slavin has looked great. Even in that loss, 319 yards, 5 touchdowns, but 2
he had a tremendous game.
He had a tremendous game. Brett Fox has been tremendous all year. But so is Carroll. And I think, another running back in the SAC that we really haven't mentioned because of Lambert and Marion Nelson is Nate Starks over at Carroll, who has become a nice weapon for them. And Jimmy Sullivan, obviously, the quarterback for Carroll, has become the primetime player for them. But to add a Nate Starks into the mix, 168 yards, 3 touchdowns versus Southside, on 10 carries, by the way. So he was getting long runs, deep runs, getting in the end zone. Carroll just becomes more dangerous each and every week because you find new things, and their defense has been tremendous. It's going to be a tough battle for Homestead, but I also think that, we're going to this game for a reason. I think Homestead has the ability to show some defensive tenacity of their own.
Well, I think, again, this game could be a track meet, because if you look at it, both quarterbacks are capable of throwing the football. They've got the weapons to do it. They both got running backs that are capable to, let the passing game set up the run, or vice versa. I think what Homestead has to watch against this week is this is not a game against Jimmy Sullivan. There may be some, hard feelings or whatever by transferring, but they've got to make sure that it's kind of like a mass, an unknown opponent, and you gear towards defending the Carroll Chargers offense and trying to attack the Carroll Chargers defense. And I think, these are one of those games where this rivalry is legit. It is a well-spirited, orchestrated rivalry for each school. And I think it's got a chance to be a phenomenal football game. And I think we're going to find out that, can Carroll continue on their journey without stubbing their toe heading into this final week of, with the rivalry games. So we're going to be out there, like I said earlier, going to be out there at 6:00 for the pregame show, 7:00 kickoff on 1380 The Fan, 100.9 FM. Let's venture into our player of the week this week.
Yeah, so we posed the question on Twitter for our top dog Twitter poll. Who was week 6 upon further review top dog? The options were Leighton Bailey, the Norwell quarterback, had 133 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, and 1 rushing touchdown. We had Carroll running back Nate Starks. We just mentioned him with 3 big touchdowns for them. Snyder's Kamari Juarez. I mean, Sherwood Haydock talked about it. 2 kickoff returns for that receiver at Snyder, 1 for 90 yards and 1 for 76 yards. And then we have Bishop Dwenger quarterback Braxton Burmis, who came in for Sam Campbell, who was injured. He threw for 128 yards and 3 passing touchdowns. We posted on Twitter. It was another close one again this week, Coach, but Leighton Bailey from Norwell comes out as the winner of the top dog poll. So, we kind of talked about him throughout this whole show, but
right,
amazing performance top to bottom for Norwell. And I think that pass that Leighton Bailey threw in the first half of that game really set the tone for the rest of the night after that. And we saw a great showing by the Norwell Knights.
Yeah, tremendous effort by all things they had up there at East Noble. And of course, we were fortunate enough to get up there to enjoy that festivities and such, but we've got to run. We're bumping up against that time. There's plenty of games this weekend to see. We'll be at Carroll at the Homestead out of Dave Walter Stadium Friday night, 6:00 pregame, 7:00 kickoff. Indiana Physical Therapy postgame show at Coventry Pizza Hut. Come out, say hi. We're out there plenty of time. If you get a chance, stop by, say hello there at the pregame show. But we want to thank you for following along. Remember, you can find this not only from the video standpoint with Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, but you can catch us on all of the podcast platforms. If you don't catch us at our Wednesday night time slot at 7:00, and then at 8:00, we're on 1380 The Fan, 100.9 FM, right after the Tom Allen Show. You can catch us there Wednesday night at 8 p.m. So for myself, the coach, Shannon Griffith, Eric Dukevich, thank you. God bless. Have a great week, and we'll catch you next Wednesday night.